This is CBC Vancouver News.
I don't think it's very useful.
They're not healthcare workers, they're not social workers.
$5 billion blowback.
It's clear that something isn't working.
Why Vancouver Police claims around social safety spending are drawing big criticism from advocates to the new mayor.
Is more than a road to us. It is connection.
Massive rebuild. A BC highway washed away a year ago is set to reconnect communities.
It was going to be trouble. They were taking whatever money you had in your pockets.
Finding a new home 50 years ago.
I am really glad that my parents decided to bring us to Canada.
One family's incredible journey from Uganda to BC. Good evening, I'm Dan Burr. Thanks for joining us. From the new mayor to social advocates, Vancouver Police are facing a lot of criticism. It's over a report the force commissioned claiming billions of dollars are spent every year on social services in the city. But as Joel Ballard reports, critics say the numbers are misleading.
The report begins with a big number, $5 billion. That's what the Vancouver Police Department says is spent on social services in neighborhoods like the downtown east side.
Despite more money than ever, more time, more resources, and more energy in the overarching system, it's clear that something isn't working.
The report was commissioned by the VPD and authored by Alberta data and analytics firm Help Seeker Technologies. It focuses on hot-button issues like homelessness and drug addiction, but a chorus of critics say the $5 billion figure isn't accurate.
The numbers are incredibly misleading, and that's the wrong way to start a really important conversation.
The report cites $5 billion is spent on what it calls a social safety net every year. But $2 billion of that is direct government transfers, funding like pensions, employment insurance, and child benefits. It also includes the Vancouver Police operating budget and Vancouver Fire and Rescue Services, funding that isn't specific to the downtown east side.
I think there are valid concerns about the way the report seems to seek to villainize those serving on the front lines, those trying to keep people healthy and alive in this crisis.
Equally thrown off by the $5 billion sum was the city's new mayor.
After we went through the report, it prompted more questions than answers. I don't think it's very useful. We had a hard time sourcing the numbers.
Chief Palmer says the report highlights a gap in oversight and transparency.
I don't want to lose sight of the big picture here is that the lack of coordination and the piecemeal approach that we've taken to dealing with social services in this city.
The report costs almost $150,000 to produce. Help Seekers says it is phase one and lacks much needed data due to limited reporting from agencies. A second phase would further determine what money is being spent where.
It's not factual at all.
This drug policy advocate is among those asking why the VPD, an independent agency, commissioned the report at all.
They're not healthcare workers, they're not social workers. They're not politicians. We have a government, we have a city government, a provincial government. They're the ones we want to solve the problems.
Chief Palmer, meanwhile, has proposed the creation of a centralized body to oversee and coordinate services. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's Public Safety Minister also weighing in. Mike Farnworth says, quote, services are strengthened and coordinated by having informed discussions with community partners on the ground, not by spreading sensationalized and misleading numbers. 1 year ago, a remote BC highway was all but wiped out by devastating floods. The only pictures from helicopters. Highway 8 links Merritt with Spence's Bridge, an important link for First Nations and communities that live nearby. Many were cut off from services and supplies, but now that road has largely been fixed. The CBC's Tom Popick was there to see the resurrection of Highway 8.
Striking down a temporary stoplight, workers on Highway 8 aren't finished their work here, but almost a year after flood devastation, traffic is now rolling through. For the provincial government, it's an event worth celebrating.
So we have restored connectivity to residents, Indigenous communities. Local industry will benefit to get materials and workers to and from their places of employment. It is a very important milestone for our province.
The region's First Nations say this is all more than welcome news.
It is more than a road to us. It is connection. It is spirit. It is a main artery within our nation. Recovery is all-encompassing. Transportation is one component. Displacement, you are gone from your home, your family, everything.
The loss was visceral for the Cook Ferry Indian Band. Cookbeam Minabariat's video of Highway 8 dissolving from the force of the Nicola River's torrent was just the start.
As of today, Chief and Council have declared a local state of emergency.
5 First Nations up and down the watershed lost roads, power, communications, and homes. Essential food and fuels had to be flown in. While rebuilding started quickly, the devastation here was widespread. 5 landslides, some 7 kilometers of highway washed away in a single stretch. Band members were forced to detour more than 2 hours to get to Merritt. Temporary bridges have now been built. More than 25 sections of highway rest on resilient roadbed designed to withstand future climate change disasters. But much of the road still has to be paved, bridges expanded, and safety barriers erected. The cost so far tops $100 million, some 40% of the $250 million spent so far on post-flood highway reconstruction. But it's projects being done in cooperation with First Nations. 30% of construction crews are Indigenous. They say the work here is not over, either on the highway or on reconciliation.
Now more than ever, there's a signal to ministries to rid yourselves of the silos you work in and come collectively, as us as chiefs have to do every day, to work through these devastations, traumas.
For First Nations, for the moment, this road connecting communities is seen as a start. The first steps, they hope, to true partnership. Tom Popick, CBC News near Spence's Bridge.
An anti-Asian advocacy group is applauding a judge's decision to sentence 2 people to 12 months probation after a racist incident at a Richmond coffee shop. But they say more work is ahead.
We welcome Judge Vander's sentence. It sends a message that hate-motivated crime are unacceptable in Canada. There has been a long wait of 19 months. And finally, justice has been served.
2 people were charged after they spilled or threw coffee and used racist language to a cafe worker last March. The judge notes the confrontation escalated when the manager tried to enforce pandemic rules in place at the time. The group has been working to raise awareness about racist hate crimes since the trial began. Crown and defense are painting 2 very different pictures in closing arguments at the public mischief trial for former Surrey Mayor Doug McCallum. He claims his foot was run over in a grocery store parking lot. And as Michelle Gassoub tells us, the case could hang on discrepancies in the information he gave to police in his original interview.
Over the past week and a half, Crown and defense presented 2 very different versions of what exactly happened in the Save-On Foods parking lot that day. And today we heard final arguments in Doug McCallum's public mischief trial. McCallum's defense argued there's no evidence his foot wasn't run over by Debbie Johnstone after their verbal altercation. They said he acted reasonably in the aftermath, calling 911 and providing police with all the evidence they asked for. And they argued any discrepancies in McCallum's description of what exactly happened can be explained away because he was in shock. But over several hours today, Crown presented a very different version of what happened on that day in September, arguing that even if Johnstone did run over his foot, McCallum still intentionally exploited what would have been an obvious accident to get back at a political foe. Johnstone, after all, was a high-profile member of a group opposed to McCallum's plans for municipal police force. The Crown maintains McCallum attempted to mislead police about what happened to get her in trouble, saying 11 times that he was pinned to his car, when video reveals that wasn't the case. And they argue McCallum would not have been in shock, given that over 4 hours had passed by the time he was making those statements. So were the discrepancies in McCallum's original police interview innocent mistakes and exaggerations from someone who was in shock? Or were they a calculated attempt to get police to investigate a longtime political foe? That's the question that is now in front of a judge, with a decision expected in 2 weeks. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Surrey.
Are fewer people wearing poppies this year? Perhaps you haven't seen as many around. Possible reason may be because they're harder to find. Vincent Papakwash has more on the hope to change that.
A quick walk around downtown Vancouver, and it's likely you won't see many poppies. I checked here and here, places that normally carry the iconic emblems. And finally, I checked here, at Robson and Hamilton. This is where I finally found a poppy downtown. So the question is, are there truly fewer poppy boxes out there at local businesses?
But I imagine that most cafes and shops have a tray up by the till.
Well, actually, I haven't seen any poppy sellers. I would have bought one if I'd seen one, yes.
Lonsdale Market, they were selling them, yeah. And I did have one, but I lost it.
This is the way the poppies arrive to us. They're in bundles of 5 like this.
Every year, the Vancouver Poppy Fund orders boxes from the National Legion Command, but they say it's getting harder to find places to set up.
When the branches went out with their poppy trays, they have to get permission before they go. And they've been told if you don't have permission to go, don't go.
30,000 boxes have been sent out across the country, which really isn't a decrease from previous years. So why does it seem like fewer people are wearing poppies now?
We don't have a lot of volunteers this year. It's mostly due to COVID.
Robert Cowley has been volunteering with the Legion for 22 years.
We're always looking for more volunteers, and we have several locations. We're being asked constantly if somebody could come in, stand in front of their location and do it, but unfortunately we just don't have the volunteers for that this year.
And there are other ways people can help.
If you own a business and you have a business you would like a poppy tray, let them know you would like a tray.
While there may be concern with fewer volunteers this year, the hope is things will bounce back next year. Vincent Papakwash, CBC News.
Come here with nothing and start a new life from scratch. But we did.
50 years after they were forced to flee, one family looks back at their journey from Uganda to BC. Stick around.
Yes.
And thanks for staying with us on our commercial-free live stream tonight. Still with local news, federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was in Vancouver today and spoke with the media after a long break. The federal opposition leader hasn't been taking many questions from reporters since he was elected almost 2 months ago. He was asked for his assessment of the evidence at the Public Order Emergency Commission into last winter's convoy protests. Poilievre says his position has not changed. He supports law-abiding and peaceful protesters who were there and condemns anyone who behaved badly or broke laws.
I think it's possible to support the overall cause of personal free choice in vaccination and the overall cause of respecting the trucker's ability to earn an income while holding individually responsible anyone who behaved badly, broke laws, or blockaded key infrastructure. That was my position before, during, and now.
The event comes as the hearing continues on the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act to end the convoy protests. Well, they came into the NHL together as teenagers. Now Vancouver Canucks legends Henrik and Daniel Sedin are heading into the Hockey Hall of Fame side by side, but don't expect them to brag.
It's a great honor, but like I said, we never look at ourselves as those types of players that joins the Hall of Fame.
We got a chance to play on the same team, and I think we wanted to make the most out of it, and that's I think what we're proud of.
The Twins headline the class of 2022, which also includes Canuck teammate Roberto Luongo. The Sedins were drafted in 1999 and played all 17 seasons of their careers with the Canucks before retiring in 2018. Former captain Henrik remains the team's all-time leader in points, assists, and games played, while Daniel leads the team in goals. The Canucks retired their jerseys 2 years ago. And it's been almost a year since a windstorm sent a barge barreling into the rocks in English Bay. Now, it's almost gone. The City of Vancouver says deconstruction is almost complete, with the hull of the barge expected to be gone by the end of next week. As long as the sunny weather holds, beach cleanup and equipment removal will follow, and the view from Sunset Beach will once more be barge-free. They were told to leave their home country in 90 days. And 50 years ago, thousands of Ugandans did just that, coming to Canada as refugees. That includes the family of one of our journalists. The CBC's Corey Correa has more from his loved ones as they remember a painful journey and a new life here.
Let's start at the beginning. After staging a coup in 1971, military leader Idi Amin became the president of Uganda. The dictator took an extreme approach to African nationalism. He accused Asians of sabotaging the country's economy, and on August 4th, 1972, he announced the country's residents of Asian descent, nearly 80,000 people, had 90 days to leave. These people were second and third generation Ugandans, recruited from countries like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh by the former British regime to work as laborers, merchants, and civil servants. Under the threat of violence, about 50,000 Asian Ugandans fled for safety by the November 8th deadline, uprooting their families, leaving behind their homes, businesses, money, and belongings, and seeking refuge in whichever country would take them. Canada agreed to accept 4,400 refugees, but took in a couple thousand more. Among them were my grandparents and 5 of their 6 children who were still in Africa. They flew into a Canadian Forces base in Montreal in late October before arriving in Vancouver, their future home. My Uncle Sam, the oldest of the siblings to make the journey, had just turned 19. I wanted to take my uncle around town, to awaken some of his earliest memories in the city, to try and get an idea of what my family experienced during their first few months in a strange new world. So Uncle Sam, 50 years later, almost to the date, this was your first point of contact in Vancouver. What are you feeling being back here?
I am really glad that my parents decided to bring us to Canada. It was amazing. The buildings, the architecture, the roads, it was thrilling. Everything was new and exciting.
This is the Mayfair Hotel, or it used to be.
Yes.
Where you guys first came to stay when you came to Canada?
It is.
Does it look the same?
Doesn't look anything like it used to. I've always wanted to come in here for the few times that I've been downtown and I've near this place, but I was afraid the doorman wouldn't let me in.
What was your stay like here?
It was a one-bedroom suite. We were 6 of us, but we made do because that's all we had.
This is the place where you first got a job. No, I mean, not this Whole Foods, but whatever was here before.
Yes, it was a steakhouse. Myself and my brother got a job as dishwashers. It was great. Nobody bothered us, although I never tasted a steak in all the time that I worked here.
Found the old photos from the basement. My grandmother was born in 1931 in Western Uganda. After 40 years there, growing up, getting married, working as a secretary, and raising 6 children, she was forced out. These photos were among the few possessions you took.
Yes.
From Uganda when you had to leave.
Yeah. This was in Uganda. That's my mother's home.
Tell me about the expulsion order. Where were you when you heard about it?
I was at work, and then my boss told me to, go home. And the children, of course, came from school. I told them what had happened. That there was going to be trouble. Came at us like a bomb.
My great-uncle Willie found out about the order while he was in Munich, competing in the Olympic Games. He was on the Ugandan field hockey team, preparing to represent the same country that was kicking him out.
We had no time for all this stuff. We left our apartment, our cars, and somebody drove us to the airport. And that stretch of the airport was, 6 or 7 stops by the Uganda Army. And they were taking whatever money you had in your pockets, your gold, your silver. They stripped all the Asians of anything valuable they had on them.
We didn't care because we were worried about our lives more than our possessions.
Then how did you guys end up in Canada? I heard that it was your idea.
No, it wasn't my idea. It was my husband. He heard that, Canada was the best place. So that's how we came out here.
Do you think back to Uganda at any point, and does it make you upset thinking that they, kicked 3 generations of your family out of the country?
Not at all. I mean, I think back fondly because during the winters especially, I long for the heat.
Strange that we could just leave something that is yours personally and go and live in a country, come here with nothing and start a new life from scratch. But we did, and we are happy for it.
Reflecting on 50 years in Canada, you raised 6 kids here, 12 grandkids, 8 great-grandkids. What do you think about all that you've built?
I think that is a wonderful thing.
Here's a live shot of Cambie Street in City Hall. Another cold fall day on the south coast. Johanna will have your BC-wide forecast after this.
They're Japanese tourists, and as Ian Hannamansing tells us, Eaton's and other stores are going all out to make them feel right at home.
A Monday morning staff briefing at Eaton's. The topic today, the Japanese yen.
Also, just for your information, some examples of the yen so that you can recognize it.
Starting this morning, customers can use yen at this store, and a Japanese translation service is a phone call away. All this to try to lure the affluent, expanding Japanese tourist trade to a very traditional Canadian department store.
It's a touch of something familiar to them, and it's a gesture of respect and the fact that we would like them to visit our store.
And it's quite a lucrative market. Japanese visitors spend more per person than any other tourists in Vancouver, $93 a day, $58 million last year.
It's the fastest growing market we have. About 175,000 of them came last year, and although they come for beauty, the fact is that their activity is shopping.
The impact of the Japanese tourist boom on the city is probably most evident on this street, where brand new stores catering almost exclusively to visitors from Japan are quickly filling up the block. This is the OK Gift Store, a favorite stop for a lot of Japanese tourists. Yuko Tsukamoto recently moved to Canada, but her mother is visiting and she's buying some gifts to take back. Tsukamoto says she feels at home at this store.
I can buy goods easily because staff or all staff is Japanese and staff speak Japanese for me.
The people at Eaton's would like to make Japanese tourists equally comfortable here. They're not sure how long that will take. By late this afternoon, there were 5 sales in yen. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Join Kitsand journalist Angela Starrett as she uncovers land theft in Canada in the new CBC British Columbia original podcast, Land Back, out November 15th. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox and keep connected with us.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
Time for a BC-wide weather forecast with meteorologist Johanna Wagstaff. Joe, clear and crisp today across the south coast, but we're coming to the end of this real cold snap, if we can call it that.
We can call it a cold snap,
Okay.
yeah. And once more into the fray, once more into the Arctic chill tonight.
Good reference.
Thank you. It is still going to be cool, but blue skies, not gray. The Arctic outflow remains entrenched across the province for really one more night. I'll show you why it gets kicked out in a moment, but that means fairly gusty winds, wind chills down to -10 for Metro Vancouver and -20 and colder for the rest of the province. This is the weather maker that will begin to push out that Arctic air mass. Before we get there, Arctic outflow still in place for Terrace with those strong winds. Surrounding Terrace, we're actually under snowfall warning, and this is as that Pacific pushes moisture in overnight tonight through tomorrow. We'll see some of that fall, 10 to 20 centimeters for inland central coastal sections. Check out these temperatures, though. These are the afternoon highs for Thursday. So a little warmer as we head into the end of the week, -1 for places like Williams Lake, Revelstone, and then into the weekend, a little warmer still, actually getting on the plus side for places like Princeton and Kelowna as we head into the back end of the weekend. So still below seasonal even through the weekend, but just not Arctic chill. So bigger picture, this high pressure is really the Arctic air mass. The center of this high is the core of the Arctic air. And over the next couple of days, it shifts into the prairies. So some of those extreme wind chills moving eastward. Meanwhile, a double-barreled low will bring that snowfall through inland coastal sections. Just a very slight chance of a stray flurry tomorrow for us, mainly just increasing cloud. And then as high pressure builds back in for the weekend, it's a different air mass, so not quite as cold as the one we've been under. That's a high of 4 for tomorrow. Again, increasing clouds through the day. You'll end up with a mainly cloudy Thursday and just the slightest risk of a flurry. Above the freezing mark for the rest of the week. Friday, looking to see those showers, and Sunday, bit of a washout at this point. So, Dan, below seasonal, but not Arctic. That's the long range in a nutshell.
We can handle this.
Yes, something moderate I think we deserve. Something in the middle is
Agreed,
fine.
we've earned it.
Yes, we have.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
And that is your late news for Wednesday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news at any time, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. It starts tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. And I will see you next week. Good night.